Was I wrong for refusing to hand over half my jackpot? A few months ago, I was stunned to discover that I had won the equivalent of about $6,800,000 in a national lottery drawing. I am a 21-year-old software analyst, and up until that moment, my biggest financial concern was paying rent and building a small emergency fund. After claiming the prize, I met with financial advisors and invested most of the money across several diversified funds and long-term investments rather than spending it right away. Naturally, I was excited and shared the news with my family after keeping it to myself for a little over a week. My parents, who are both in their early 50s, were thrilled at first. We have always had a close relationship, so I expected the conversation to be full of celebration and support. Instead, things took an unexpected turn. Within a few days, they began discussing the money as though it already belonged to all of us collectively. They talked about leaving their jobs immediately, purchasing a vacation property on the coast, upgrading their vehicles, taking extended trips around the world, and completely changing their lifestyle. Curious, I eventually asked how much of the winnings they expected to receive. Without hesitation, they told me they assumed they would be getting half. I was honestly shocked. While I understand that even after giving away half I would still be financially secure, I never felt that they were automatically entitled to such a large portion of something that was awarded solely to me. Before that conversation, I had already planned to give them a substantial gift as a way of thanking them for everything they had done while raising me. My idea was to give them roughly $1,200,000. When I presented that amount expecting them to be pleased, they reacted badly. They accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. According to them, I was failing to appreciate everything they had sacrificed over the years. They rejected the gift outright and insisted that the original amount they wanted was the only fair option. For context, my parents are not struggling financially. They own their home outright, have retirement savings, and live comfortably. That is part of why I believe my offer was generous. To me, receiving over $1 million with no strings attached would dramatically improve most people's lives. The disagreement has continued for weeks. On one hand, I care about my parents and still want to share some of my good fortune with them. On the other hand, their expectation that they deserve such a large percentage of the winnings has left a bitter taste in my mouth. The more they push, the less comfortable I feel. Now I am wondering whether I am being unreasonable for refusing to give them half of the money, or whether their expectation crossed a line. Was I wrong for telling my neighbour why everyone is avoiding her? I am a 25-year-old woman living in a row of attached townhouses. About 14 months ago, a new couple moved into the unit next to mine. For the first few months, everything seemed normal. Then the renovation work started, and it never seemed to end. For roughly 7 months straight, there has been construction at their property 6 days a week. The crews arrive around 8 in the morning, sometimes even earlier, and the noise begins immediately. It is not just the sound of tools and machinery. The workers regularly shout across the property, sing loudly, blast music, and carry on conversations at full volume. Several neighbours have politely asked them to keep it down during the early morning hours, especially on weekends. Instead of cooperating, some of the workers seem to take it as a challenge and become even louder. The crews have also caused other issues throughout the neighbourhood. Work materials and debris occasionally end up in nearby yards, and workers have entered private gardens to retrieve items without asking permission. Their vehicles frequently block the narrow street during busy morning hours, making it difficult for residents to leave for work or school. Whenever someone asks them to move, they often respond with visible irritation. Because my home shares a wall with theirs, the impact has been especially noticeable. The constant vibration from power tools and heavy equipment has triggered severe headaches and migraines for me on multiple occasions. What makes it more frustrating is that none of us really know what is being done. The project does not appear to be a major addition, and most of the activity seems to involve the exterior of the house. Yet month after month, the work continues. A few days ago, the wife next door approached me and asked why there seemed to be tension between her family and the rest of the neighbourhood. She looked genuinely confused. I decided to answer honestly. I told her, "You have had noisy construction happening almost every day for 7 months. People are exhausted and frustrated." She looked hurt but simply nodded and walked away. A few days later, her husband confronted me. He said I was being unfair and acting angry over something unavoidable because construction work is naturally loud. He also accused me of blaming his wife for the behaviour of the contractors, which was not what I intended. According to him, the house required extensive repairs to make it livable, and there was no way around the disruption. Before leaving, he told me he hoped I never found myself needing major work done on my own house. For additional context, several neighbours have already reported the situation to local authorities. However, because the work is taking place during legally permitted hours and the homeowners have the proper permits, officials have said there is little they can do. Now I am wondering whether I crossed a line by being so direct when she asked why the neighbourhood seemed unhappy with them, or whether I simply answered the question she chose to ask. Did I cross a line by sending my partner a recipe video? I am a 38-year-old accountant and my wife is 36. We've been married for several years and generally divide household responsibilities between us. One thing that has always been true, though, is that she handles almost all of the cooking while I take care of other chores around the house, including cleaning up after meals. A few days ago, my wife asked what I would like for dinner the following evening. I told her I would think about it. Later that night, while scrolling through social media, I came across a video showing a beef noodle dish that looked delicious. Since she had specifically asked for ideas, I sent her the video and said it looked good if she wanted to try making it. I did not tell her she had to cook it. I did not demand it. I simply forwarded the recipe because she had asked what I might like to eat. Her reaction caught me completely off guard. She became extremely upset and told me she was tired of being treated like the household cook. She said she was not a servant whose purpose was to prepare meals while I sat back making requests. She pointed out that she is always the one cooking and accused me of taking that for granted. I tried to explain that I was only answering the question she had asked. I'd even suggested alternatives, such as going out to eat instead or making the dish together on a weekend when we both had more time. From my perspective, I had merely offered a suggestion, not an order. For some background, I rarely cook. I usually work late, and when I am responsible for my own meals, I tend to make something very simple or grab takeout. Cooking has never really been my thing beyond basic meals. My wife, on the other hand, genuinely enjoys experimenting with recipes and has often talked about how much she likes trying new dishes. The recipe itself was not particularly complicated. In fact, she has made meals that were far more involved in the past. That is part of why I never imagined sending it would be taken as an unreasonable request. What bothered me most was not that she disagreed with me. It was how quickly the conversation escalated. Even if I unknowingly touched a nerve, I did not feel that sharing a recipe after being asked for dinner ideas deserved that level of anger. Now I am left wondering whether I accidentally came across as entitled without realizing it, or whether a reaction was really about a larger frustration that had been building up for a long time. My partner volunteered to coach our son's team and now wants me to share the job. My husband and I enrolled our 9-year-old son in a community soccer league this season. Before the season started, we agreed on a simple arrangement. We would alternate who would take him to practices, and we would both attend his games whenever possible. During the parents' orientation meeting, the head coach mentioned that the team still needed an assistant coach and asked for volunteers. We were told anyone interested could sign up before the first practice. Later that evening, my husband suggested that I volunteer because I had played soccer when I was younger. I immediately told him I had no interest in coaching. I enjoy watching my son play, but I did not want the commitment that comes with running drills, helping organize practices, and attending every team event. He then said he might volunteer instead. I told him very clearly that becoming an assistant coach would mean showing up to every practice and every game. I even asked if he was sure he wanted that level of commitment. He said it was completely fine and that he understood what he was signing up for. At the first practice, he officially volunteered and was accepted as the assistant coach. The issue started a week later. When it was time for the second practice, I noticed he was still sitting on the couch and making no effort to get ready. When I asked what was going on, he said it was my turn to take our son to practice according to our original schedule. I reminded him that he was now the assistant coach and needed to be there regardless of whose turn it would have been under our original arrangement. That is when he argued that since we had originally agreed to split practice transportation, we should also be splitting the assistant coaching responsibilities. According to him, if he was doing extra work as a coach, I should be helping balance things out by attending practices and sharing some of their commitment. I told him that was never part of our agreement. I had specifically declined the coaching role, and before he volunteered, I warned him exactly what the position would require. He chose to take on those responsibilities anyway. I never agreed to coach, assist, or attend every practice alongside him. Now he is frustrated and says I am refusing to share the workload fairly. He thinks I should attend practices with him so everything feels more equal. I feel that the coaching duties belong to the person who volunteered for them, while my responsibilities remain what we originally agreed upon, helping with our son's activities and attending games. Now he is acting as though I changed the deal, while I feel like he is trying to rewrite the agreement after the fact. Was I wrong for refusing to split the assistant coaching responsibilities after he volunteered for the position himself? Am I in the wrong for refusing to be everyone's driver after someone assumed I would take responsibility for driving the whole group home? Last Sunday I went out with a group of friends I have known for a long time. We had dinner and later went to a board game cafe where some people drank alcohol while others, including me, did not. The day before, someone in our group chat asked how everyone was getting to the venue. I said I would be driving myself because I live quite far away and had an early morning work appointment the next day. I did not offer to drive anyone else, and nobody asked me to do so. At the cafe, I stayed completely sober so I could drive home safely. Everything was going fine until near closing time when one of my friends said it was good that I would be driving everyone home. I assumed there was a misunderstanding and clarified that I was only driving myself. That is when I learned that another friend had been telling people during the evening that I would not be drinking and would therefore be responsible for driving everyone home. The problem is that I never agreed to this arrangement. Several friends lived in completely different directions from my home, and driving everyone would have added more than an hour and a half to my trip. I also had an early morning work appointment and needed to be rested. Some friends said ride-sharing services were expensive and that the phone batteries were low, so it would be easier if I helped. I offered a compromise. I could drive the 2 friends who lived closest to me, and I would stay with the others while they arranged transportation. I also waited with them until their ride-share cars arrived so nobody was left stranded. However, the friend who had told others I would drive everyone became upset. She said I embarrassed her because she had already promised people I would take them home. I told her she should not have made promises involving my car time or responsibility without asking me first. The rest of the night ended awkwardly, and now she is telling other people that I ruined the evening by refusing to drive everyone when I was not drinking anyway. I do not think it is unreasonable to set boundaries around my time and responsibility, especially when I never agreed to take on that role. Still, I am wondering if I handled the situation too strictly. Am I in the wrong? Was I wrong to expect my housemate to replace what she took? I'm a 31-year-old man living with my housemate, Dana, who is 34. We keep almost everything in the apartment completely separate. She likes having strict systems, so from the day I moved in, we divided storage space down the middle. My groceries go on one side, hers on the other. My dishes stay in one section of the cabinet, hers in another. It works well because there's never any confusion about what belongs to whom. The one exception is our bedding storage. The closet isn't set up well for shelves, so we each use large labelled bins to store spare linens. A couple of weeks ago, I bought a new set of thermal sheets because the weather has been getting colder. They were more expensive than I'd usually spend, around $180, and several friends recommended them because they stay warm during the winter. I washed them and packed them away, planning to put them on my bed the following weekend. When I finally went to grab them, they were gone. After searching the apartment, I asked Dana if she had seen them. She casually told me she had taken them because her room had been chilly and she wanted to try them out. I was annoyed because she never asked for permission. I told her I needed them back so I could wash them and use them myself. That's when she informed me that I probably wouldn't want them anymore because she and her partner had been sleeping on them. The situation immediately upset me because I have contamination-related OCD, something she has known about for years. Even though I've made a lot of progress through treatment, certain situations can still trigger intense anxiety. Hearing that someone else had used my brand new sheets in that way made me feel like I could never comfortably use them again. I told her that because she took them without asking and used them in a way she knew would create a problem for me, she should replace them. Dana refused. She said I was being unreasonable, that my anxiety wasn't her responsibility, and that if I wanted another set, I could buy one myself. She also said that people share things all the time and that I needed to stop making such a big deal out of it. What bothers me most is that it feels intentional. She knows how particular I am about my belongings, and she knows I struggle with contamination fears. Part of me wonders whether she mentioned using the sheets with her partner because she knew it would make me reluctant to take them back. She insists that idea is ridiculous and says I'm reading too much into it. I understand that many people would simply wash the sheets and move on. The issue for me is that she took something that clearly belonged to me, never asked permission, and then returned it in a condition she knew would be difficult for me to accept. Because of that, I feel she should be responsible for replacing them rather than expecting me to absorb the cost myself. Am I wrong? Am I in the wrong for refusing to hand over an expensive hoodie to a student's mother without proof, even after she publicly accused me of stealing it? I work as a middle school teacher, and this happened during the final week of the school year. We had a large field day event with multiple stations, games, and activities spread across the gym and outdoor fields. By the end of the day, the entire school looked like a storm had passed through it, backpacks unzipped, water bottles everywhere, and hoodies tossed into random piles. After the event, I was asked to help at the lost and found table, which was already overflowing. We have a strict rule for unlabeled items. If something does not have a name tag, the person claiming it must describe it in detail that cannot be easily guessed. We require specifics like brand details, pocket contents, unique marks, or anything that proves ownership. Near the end of the day, a student dropped off a navy hoodie from a well-known expensive brand. It had no name tag. However, inside the front pocket was a folded robotics club schedule with handwritten initials and a small club sticker. About 10 minutes later, the parent arrived at the table visibly upset. Before I could even speak, she pointed at the hoodie and said it belonged to her son and demanded I hand it over immediately. I explained the procedure and asked her to describe it. She said it was dark blue, expensive brand, medium size. When I told her the description matched at least half the school, she became angry and said I was deliberately making things difficult and playing power games over a child's property. I asked if there was anything more specific, like what might be in the pockets or any identifying marks. She snapped that she was not going to perform a detailed interrogation just to get her child's hoodie back and accused me of treating her like a suspect. At one point, her voice rose so much that other parents started looking over. She said I was humiliating her in front of everyone and implied I was either careless or intentionally withholding lost property. I calmly repeated that I could not release an expensive item without confirmation, especially since there was no name and multiple identical hoodies had already been turned in that day. I offered for her to return the next morning with more details or for her son to identify it in person. She stormed off and told a nearby staff member that I was refusing to return stolen property. The next morning, the situation escalated further. The student who actually owned the hoodie came in, immediately identified it, and correctly described the robotic schedule with his initials and sticker inside the pocket, as well as the small stain on the sleeve. It was clearly his. Later that day, I was informed that the parent had emailed the school administration claiming I had embarrassed her, falsely accused her of lying, and humiliated her as a mother in front of the school community. She also said I should have handed it over immediately and dealt with consequences later. The administration reviewed it and said I followed proper procedure, but the parent is now demanding a formal apology and escalation of the issue. I do not feel I did anything wrong. If anything, I feel that handing over an expensive item without verification would have been irresponsible. Am I in the wrong? Am I in the wrong for telling my sister she is the common factor in her failed relationships? I am a 29-year-old man, and my sister is 34. We both grew up in Manchester, but she now lives in a modern apartment in Leeds after buying her place a few years ago. She has a well-paying job in marketing, a strong social life, and has never had trouble meeting people or starting relationships. The issue is that every relationship she enters seems to fall apart within a few months. Her most recent boyfriend was a man she met on a dating app in early spring while she was attending a work conference in Edinburgh. They connected quickly and began seeing each other almost immediately. Within a month, she was travelling down to London most weekends to stay with him, introducing him to our family over video calls and talking about how she had finally met someone serious. She even mentioned that they had casually looked at engagement rings while shopping one afternoon in Covent Garden. About 10 days ago, she called our family in tears saying the relationship had ended. She said he had broken up with her suddenly and that she believed he had turned out to be manipulative and emotionally immature like her previous partners. A few days later, she showed me parts of their message history. From what I saw, the same pattern I had noticed in past relationships was repeating itself. At the beginning, she tends to present a highly curated version of her personality. She will talk about loving hiking in the Lake District, cooking elaborate meals on weekends, and being very spontaneous with travel plans. However, after the initial honeymoon period, her behavior tends to shift quite sharply. She stops wanting to do outdoor activities, becomes frustrated by cooking plans, and prefers staying in or booking short luxury resort holidays instead. When her partner reacts with confusion or disappointment, she often interprets it as controlling behavior or emotional pressure, which escalates into arguments. In this most recent relationship, the final conflict started after a trip planned to a music festival in Manchester. They had agreed months earlier to sell part of their ticket package, but she changed her mind last minute and refused. When he disagreed, she became extremely angry, insulted him, and accused him of being controlling and selfish. He ended the relationship shortly after and blocked her. Afterwards, she escalated the situation further by saying she was considering contacting his employer in London to report him for supposed emotional instability, claiming he should not be working in a role that involves public interaction. That is when I felt the situation had gone too far. During a family dinner at my parents' house in Cheshire, I told her that she is the common factor in her relationship breakdowns and that if she was honest and consistent about who she is from the start, she would likely find people who actually match her lifestyle instead of repeating the same cycle. She immediately became emotional, left the table, and drove back to Leeds that night. Later, my mother called me saying I had humiliated her and demanded I apologise. I am not sure if I was too blunt, but from my perspective this is a repeating pattern that keeps causing the same outcome, and no one in the family has ever said it directly. Am I in the wrong? Was I wrong for not wanting my husband to leave me alone with a newborn for a weekend trip? I am expecting my first child, a daughter, and my husband and I have recently found ourselves in a disagreement that has become much bigger than either of us expected. My husband moved here from overseas several years ago for work, which is how we met. Because of the distance, he has not seen his family in quite a long time, and I know how difficult that has been for him. I genuinely want him to have time with them when they visit. The issue began when he told me he wanted to bring his mother here shortly after the baby is born. I explained that I was not comfortable having visitors during the first month after delivery. This is our first child, and everything I have learned suggests that those early weeks can be physically and emotionally overwhelming. I will be recovering from childbirth, dealing with sleep deprivation, adjusting to caring for a newborn, and hopefully establishing a feeding routine. To keep things fair, I made the same rule for my own family. My parents and siblings were told that visits would need to wait unless there was a specific reason or arrangement. I suggested that his mother come about a month after the birth instead, and after some discussion, he agreed. I also made it clear that I had no problem with him spending time showing his mother around the country while she was here. My only request was that I be given advance notice so I could arrange support from my own family if I needed help while he was away. The disagreement escalated when he revealed that he wanted to take his mother on a weekend trip to a city roughly 8 hours away by car. The plan would involve leaving for several days while I stayed home alone with our newborn. I immediately told him that I was not comfortable with that. I suggested several alternatives that were much closer to home. There are plenty of places to visit nearby, and I even pointed out that I have lived here my entire life and have never managed to visit the destination he has chosen. My thought was that there would be plenty of opportunities in the future to make that trip together as a family once our daughter is older. He dismissed those suggestions and said he really wanted his mother to experience that particular city while she was visiting. At that point, I told him that I felt he was losing sight of the purpose of the trip. As far as I was concerned, the primary reason for his mother's visit was to spend time with her new granddaughter. I have absolutely no issue with them doing tourist activities, but leaving me alone with a very young baby for an entire weekend while they travel hundreds of miles away feels unreasonable. I also pointed out that he plans to take several months of parental leave after the birth. In my mind, that leave exists so both parents can care for the baby and so the recovering parent has support. If he feels comfortable leaving for a multi-day trip during that period, I struggle to understand why he considers that leave necessary in the first place. His response was that I am overreacting and letting pregnancy emotions make this into a bigger issue than it really is. Now I am wondering whether I am being unreasonable for expecting him to stay relatively close to home during those early months, or whether my concerns about being left alone with the newborn are justified. Was I wrong for refusing to drive my friend across town for ingredients the day before a wedding? One of my friends, Emily, has been trying to start a wedding cake business. She has been promoting herself online for a while, even though she has very little formal training. When potential clients asked whether she had completed professional baking courses, she told them she had. Later, she admitted to me that she had never actually taken any of those courses but felt people would be more likely to hire her if they believed she had. She has made a handful of small cakes so far. In my opinion, they are still very much beginner level and not quite what I would expect for a wedding, but everyone has to start somewhere and I assume she was trying to build experience. Earlier this year, our mutual friend Megan got engaged and started planning her wedding. Emily immediately volunteered herself to make the wedding cake. It was not really a discussion. She more or less announced that she would be doing it and insisted she would only charge for ingredients. Megan tends to avoid conflict and eventually agreed. Emily was excited because she saw it as an opportunity to add a real wedding cake to her portfolio and use it to help launch her business. The problem started the day before the wedding. That evening, Emily contacted me and asked if I could drive her to another city to buy several ingredients she suddenly realized she needed for the cake. She knew I had specifically taken the day off work before the wedding. The reason she asked me was because, although she has a driver's license and owns a car, she refuses to drive outside our local area because it makes her nervous. I told her I couldn't do it. I had taken the day off for a reason. I still needed to collect a gift, finish some last-minute errands, get my hair done, and prepare everything for the wedding. I also admitted I was surprised that, with less than 24 hours before the event, she still did not have all the ingredients she needed. Instead of accepting that answer, she became irritated and asked why I had not finished all my own preparations earlier. I pointed out that I did not need to. I had deliberately set aside the entire day to take care of those things. She then told me that if I did not drive her, the wedding cake might be ruined. I apologized but stood my ground. From my perspective, she had known about this wedding for months and had personally pushed to be the one responsible for the cake. It did not seem reasonable to make her lack of planning my emergency. The next day, I completed my errands while Emily ended up taking a train to get the ingredients herself. That evening, several of us gathered before the wedding festivities. The moment Emily saw me, she looked annoyed and immediately launched into a story about how difficult her day had been. She complained about walking to the station, waiting for trains, carrying ingredients back, and how much time it had taken away from finishing the cake. She made it sound as though I had forced her into an impossible situation. Since then, she has been telling people that I refused to help make sure the bride's wedding cake was not ruined. That part is what has me second-guessing myself. I know I was not responsible for buying ingredients for someone else's project. At the same time, this was a wedding, and if the cake had failed, it would have affected the bride more than anyone else. Part of me wonders whether I should have put my own plans on hold and helped for the sake of making sure the wedding went smoothly, even if the situation was entirely caused by Emily's poor planning. Was I wrong for refusing to drive her and prioritizing my own preparations instead? Did I go too far refusing to approve community service hours? A few weekends ago, I helped coordinate a neighborhood riverbank restoration project in a suburban area outside Portland. The event ran from 8 o'clock until noon, and many local high school students attended because they needed community service hours to satisfy graduation requirements. The process was straightforward. Participants checked in when they arrived, helped with the cleanup, and at the end of the event verified the number of hours they had actually worked. One student, whom I'll call Ethan, arrived with his father around 8:20. He signed the attendance sheet, grabbed a safety vest and collection bucket, took a few pictures near the registration tent, and walked toward the work area. For a little while I assumed he was participating with one of the crew scattered throughout the park. As the morning went on, however, I noticed I never saw him with any of the teams returning the collected debris. Since I was busy organizing supplies and tracking volunteers, I didn't spend time searching for him. I simply assumed he might be working somewhere farther away. Around 11:45, just as everyone was packing up and turning in equipment, Ethan suddenly reappeared carrying a smoothie and chatting casually with his father. His dad immediately handed me a school verification form and asked me to confirm 4 hours of volunteer service. I hesitated and explained that I couldn't honestly do that. From what I had personally observed, Ethan had been present for less than an hour. I told them I would be comfortable approving 1 hour, possibly a little less, but not the full 4. His father became visibly irritated and insisted that Ethan had been helping along a different section of the river trail all morning. I replied that if one of the crew supervisors could confirm that, I would gladly adjust the hours. Unfortunately, none of the supervisors remembered seeing him. At that point, his father lowered his voice and explained that Ethan urgently needed the service hours for school and could face consequences if he came up short. I told him I understood the situation, but I wasn't comfortable certifying work that I couldn't verify. The conversation quickly became tense. His father accused me of embarrassing his son over a technicality. In reality, there were only a handful of volunteers still nearby, and I never criticized Ethan personally. I simply explained that signing off on hours someone didn't complete would defeat the purpose of the program. In the end, I approved 1 hour of service and returned the paperwork. Ethan barely looked up from his phone during the entire exchange, while his father left clearly frustrated. Since then, I've wondered whether I handled the situation too rigidly. Part of me feels bad because the student may now have to find another volunteer opportunity. On the other hand, community service requirements seem meaningless if people can collect credit for hours they didn't actually work. Was I wrong for refusing to sign off on the for 4 hours? Should I cancel my baby shower over control of my registry? I am pregnant with my first child, a baby girl, and I've been trying to prepare for her arrival while also navigating some ongoing tension with my family. Growing up, I was the younger of 2 daughters. My older sister, Mara, and my mother have always shared a very similar, very put-together aesthetic, everything coordinated, very pastel and trendy. I, on the other hand, never really fit into that. As a kid, I mostly wore Mara's old clothes, which I never felt comfortable in because they didn't fit me well and didn't really feel like me. I wasn't really able to choose my own style until I was a teenager and started working part-time, which finally gave me the freedom to buy things I actually liked. Now that I'm pregnant, Mara offered to host my baby shower, which I initially thought was very kind. She also offered to help me build my baby registry since she already has 2 children and experience with what babies need. At first, I appreciated the help, but when we started going through my registry together, she began insisting that I remove most of the items I had picked out. She kept telling me that I didn't need to register for certain essentials because she would just give me her son's used items instead. It wasn't just a few things here and there. She was suggesting I remove almost everything crib items, changing supplies, clothing, and other basic necessities because she wanted me to rely primarily on what she already had at home. I don't have a problem with hand-me-downs in general, and I was open to using some items. But what she is heavily themed toward her son's lots of cars, dinosaurs, sports prints, and very boy-specific colours. I wanted to be able to choose a mix for my daughter, including softer, floral, and neutral styles, so she can grow up with some variety and space to develop her own identity rather than everything being predetermined. The bigger issue for me was that it started to feel less like support and more like I wasn't being allowed to make choices for my own child. It also brought up old feelings from my childhood of not having much say in what I wore or had. After going back and forth, I told her that if I couldn't actually make decisions about my own baby registry, then it didn't make sense for her to continue planning the baby shower, and she should cancel it. She was very hurt and said I was being ungrateful and acting like I was too good for her children's things. My mother agreed with her and said I should just accept everything and be grateful instead of wanting new items or choices of my own. Now my mother says she won't be buying anything for the baby either, since she already spent money on my nephews, and my sister feels I completely rejected her effort to help. My partner supports me and even suggested we could host our own celebration instead, focused on the baby rather than gifts. I understand my sister was trying to help in her own way, but I feel like I'm being pushed into giving up control over my own baby space and choices in a way that doesn't feel right to me. So am I wrong for telling her to cancel the baby shower? Was I wrong for demanding my parking pass back? A few months ago, I moved into a condominium in Vancouver with a roommate. The building has a strict parking policy. Every unit receives 2 parking passes, and vehicles parked without one can be ticketed or towed. Management takes the rules seriously, and several residents have already had their cars removed from the lot. Because I occasionally switch between my personal vehicle and the company vehicle for work, I usually keep my parking pass in a small basket near the front entrance. It is my signed pass, and I'm the only one who uses it. One Friday evening, after finishing a late shift, I came home and noticed the pass was missing. I searched my car and my bags before messaging my roommate to see if she had seen it. She casually replied that she had loaned it to one of her friends for the evening. I was stunned. I asked why she would give away my parking pass without asking me first. She explained that she assumed I would be spending the night at my partner's place, so she figured I wouldn't need it. She had already used her own pass for her vehicle and decided mine was available. I pointed out that I had never told her I wouldn't be coming home and that it wasn't her property to lend out. I told her I needed the pass returned immediately. She pushed back, saying her friend had already gone out for dinner across town and that it would be awkward to ask her to come back. Instead, she suggested I leave my car in a nearby shopping plaza overnight and retrieve it the next morning. I refused. That lot's poorly lit, people often gather there late at night, and I wasn't comfortable leaving my vehicle there because my roommate had given away something that belonged to me. I told her I wasn't willing to risk a ticket, towing fees, or potential damage to my car because of a decision she made without consulting me. Eventually, a friend returned about 45 minutes later and handed over the parking pass. I thanked her, apologized for the inconvenience, and explained that I had only insisted because the pass belonged to me and I genuinely needed it. The friend seemed understanding, but my roommate was clearly annoyed. Since then, my roommate has accused me of overreacting and embarrassing her in front of her friend. She says it was a small favour and that I made a much bigger issue out of it than necessary. From my perspective, the real problem was that she treated my parking pass as if it was to give it away and expected me to deal with the consequences. Now I'm wondering whether I was justified in demanding it back right away or whether I should have simply found another solution for the night. Was I wrong? Would I be wrong for telling my neighbour to stop contacting me directly? I'm a 29-year-old woman living alone in a condo complex in Ada. A few days ago, I took my dog outside for an evening walk when a man I had never met before approached me in the parking area. He looked to be in his mid-50s and immediately started asking whether I lived in a specific unit. Instead of answering, I asked why he wanted to know. He repeated the question several times before finally explaining that his elderly father, who is in his late 80s, lives in the building and had been complaining about noise coming from above his unit during the middle of the night. According to him, the property office had advised them to contact local authorities if the disturbances continued, but they wanted to speak to the resident first. I was confused because I had just returned from a 6-day trip the night before. When I told him that, he admitted he wasn't sure exactly when the noise had happened. He only knew that his father believed it was coming from directly overhead and had been disrupting his sleep. I asked what kind of noise was being reported, but he couldn't really answer. He said it sounded like furniture moving but people walking around late at night. I pointed out that if anyone heard something concerning, they could simply knock on my door. He replied that his father wouldn't feel comfortable doing that in the middle of the night. While we were talking, I noticed an older man standing nearby watching the conversation, which made the interaction feel even more uncomfortable. The man then started making assumptions about my personal life, including suggesting that I lived with my partner, which isn't true. He also mentioned that he had already spoken with another resident in the building because they weren't certain where the noise was coming from. After that, he brought up complaints about a smell he believed might be coming from my unit. I immediately told him he was mistaken. The whole conversation felt strange because the complaints were vague and seemed to be based on guesses rather than anything specific. The only incident I can think of that may have caused noise happened before my trip. A friend and I had a disagreement that became louder than it should have for a brief period before they left. It lasted only a few minutes, but I can acknowledge that it may have disturbed someone nearby. If that was what they had, I understand being frustrated and I'm willing to apologize for it. What bothered me was the way the complaint was handled. Instead of receiving a note, a message through management, or a knock on the door, I was approached outside by a stranger asking where I lived and accusing me of several things at once. The entire interaction felt intimidating. Now I'm considering leaving a note explaining that I'm sorry for any disturbance but would prefer that future concerns be directed through management or local authorities rather than having people approach me personally. Since the complaint appears to be based on a single incident rather than an ongoing problem, I feel uncomfortable being confronted this way again. Would I be wrong for setting that boundary?